2,000 years ago, a man sailed out of China with thousands of young people, craftsmen, seeds, and ships. He was supposed to find the secret of immortality. He never came back. And according to legends that survived across Japan, the place where he vanished may not have been the end of his story. It may have been the beginning of another one. More than 2,000 years ago, China's first emperor sent a man named Jofuku across the sea to find the medicine of eternal life. The mission sounded impossible. Find the islands of immortals. Bring back the elixir. Defeat death itself. But Jofuku left with far more than a search party. He left with people. He left with tools. He left with grain seeds. He left with the ingredients of a new society. Then he disappeared. No elixir returned. No fleet came home. And for over 2,000 years, one question has refused to die. Was Jofuku really searching for immortality? Or was he escaping from the most dangerous man in the world? To understand this mystery, we have to begin with Qin Shi Huang. If you're not familiar with Chinese history, think of him as part Julius Caesar, part George Washington, and part absolute monarch, a founding ruler with total power and almost no tolerance for disobedience. Qin Shi Huang was the ruler who unified China in 221 BC. Before him, the land had been divided among rival kingdoms. For generations, armies fought, alliances collapsed, and kings tried to destroy each other. Qin Shi Huang ended that age of war. He conquered the rival states. He created China's first unified empire. He standardized writing, money, weights, measurements, roads, and laws. In his world, everything had to be controlled. Language, history, movement, thought, even memory. But there was one thing he could not control: his own death. That was the great insult. He could command armies, but not time. He could execute enemies, but not aging. He could bury scholars, burn books, and force millions of people into imperial order. But he could not order his body to live forever. And the more powerful he became, the more terrifying death became. This is what makes the story so human. It is not just a Chinese legend. It is a story about every ruler, every dictator, every man who believes power should make him untouchable. Eventually, even the most powerful man in the world has to face something that does not care about power. Death does not negotiate. Death does not bow. Death does not accept imperial commands. So Qin Shi Huang turned to a group of men known as Fangxi alchemists, mystics, ritual specialists, and seekers of hidden knowledge. They claimed to understand sacred mountains, strange medicines, celestial patterns, and the secret forces of the universe. Some of them told the emperor that immortals live far out in the eastern sea. They said there were divine islands beyond the horizon: Pinglai, Fangjiang, Yingzhou. On those islands, the medicine of eternal life could be found. To us, it sounds like mythology. To Qin Shi Huang, it may have sounded like geography, not a fantasy, a destination. And then came Jofuku. Jofuku understood something very important about the emperor. He understood his fear. He knew that Qin Shi Huang did not want philosophy. He wanted a solution. He did not want comfort. He wanted a cure. So Jofuku offered him the most powerful thing a terrified ruler can hear: hope. He told the emperor that the islands of immortals could be reached. He told him the elixir could be found. He told him death could be defeated. And Qin Shi Huang believed him. The first expedition went out across the sea, but it did not bring back immortality. Jofuku returned without the elixir. For an ordinary man, failure might be embarrassing. For a man serving Qin Shi Huang, failure could be fatal. So Jofuku did not simply say, "I failed." He brought back a story. According to the legend, he claimed that the sea route was blocked by powerful forces. He said the gods required better offerings. He said enormous sea creatures stood in the way. He said the mission was still possible, but only if the emperor gave him more. More ships, more supplies, more people, more resources. And this is where the story changes. Because the second voyage was not just a search mission. It looked like something much bigger. Xu Fu asked for thousands of young boys and girls. He asked for skilled craftsmen. He asked for seeds. He asked for tools. He asked for everything a group of people would need to survive far from home. Think about that. If you are only looking for a magic medicine, why bring young people? Why bring craftsmen? Why bring grain? Why bring the building blocks of a future settlement? Maybe Xu Fu still believed in the islands of immortals. Maybe he still hoped to find something beyond the sea. But there is another possibility. Maybe he knew there was no elixir. Maybe he knew he could never complete the emperor's impossible demand. Maybe he understood the oldest rule of serving a tyrant. When the tyrant asks for the impossible, you do not fail in front of him. You disappear before he can punish you. That is why the escape theory is so powerful. Because this is not only a story about ancient China. It is a story about power and survival. In every age, in every empire, people close to absolute rulers face the same danger. If the ruler believes you can save him, you become useful. If you fail, you become disposable. Xu Fu may have realized that the emperor's trust was not protection. It was a trap. So maybe the sea was not just an obstacle. Maybe the sea was a door out of the Qin Empire, a door away from the emperor's anger, a door into a place where failure could become freedom. So the second fleet sailed east. And this time, it did not return. No medicine came back. No immortals appeared. No answer reached the imperial court. Only silence. For Qin Shi Huang, that silence was failure. For Xu Fu, if the escape theory is true, that silence was the plan. To return would mean judgment. To vanish meant survival. Later historical tradition preserved a strange detail. Xu Fu was said to have reached a place of wide plains and vast marshes. There, he declared himself king and never came back to China. That line is haunting. It does not sound like the ending of a failed expedition. It sounds like the beginning of a new life. But where? This is where history ends and the cold case begins. Because across the sea, in Japan, Xu Fu did not completely disappear. He became Jofuku, a remembered figure, a man who, according to local legends, arrived from China with knowledge, medicine, farming skills, and people. Different regions in Japan tell different versions of the story. Some connect him to Wakayama. Some connect him to Kyushu. Some say he searched for the plant of immortality. Some say he stayed because he found a land worth living in. Some traditions remember him not as an invader, but as a bringer of agriculture, medicine, and civilization. In Shingu, Japan, there is a Jofuku Park connected to this legend. In other places, stories link him to sacred herbs, landing sites, and local memory. But here is the important part. A legend is not proof. A shrine is not a passport stamp. A name on a monument is not a DNA test. And a story told for centuries does not automatically become history. So we cannot honestly say Xu Fu founded Japan. That would be too simple. And history is rarely simple. But we also cannot dismiss the legend as meaningless. Because legends often survive around something. A migration, a memory, a real contact, a forgotten wave of people, a cultural wound or a cultural gift that later generations no longer know how to explain. Ancient Japan was not isolated from the Asian continent. People crossed the sea. Crops crossed the sea. Metalworking crossed the sea. Tools, rituals, beliefs, and technologies crossed the sea. Modern research shows that the Japanese people were formed through layers of ancestry and migration. The ancient Jomon people were already living in the islands for thousands of years. Later, people from the continent brought rice farming, new technologies, and new genetic lineages. Over many centuries, these groups mixed and created something new. So Xu Fu was probably not the single father of Japan. One man and one fleet did not create an entire civilization by themselves. But his legend may point toward a much larger truth. The sea between China and Japan was never empty. It was a road, a dangerous road, A road crossed by migrants, traders, refugees, monks, craftsmen, and stories. Shufu may have been a real man who escaped. Or he may have become the face of many forgotten people who crossed the sea and were absorbed into a new world. That is what makes this mystery so fascinating. The question is not only, did Shufu reach Japan? The deeper question is, why did Japan remember him? Why would a vanished Chinese alchemist become part of local memory across the islands? Why would a failed mission for immortality turn into stories about farming, medicine, and civilization? Why would one man's disappearance survive for more than 2,000 years? Maybe because the story sits at the border between myth and history, close enough to feel possible, uncertain enough to remain mysterious, and powerful enough to survive. Meanwhile, Qin Shi Huang never found what he wanted. He searched for immortality, but died like every other man. His dynasty collapsed only a few years after his death. His empire, built to last for 10,000 generations, barely survived him. His body was sealed beneath the earth, inside a massive tomb that still remains unopened. That is the irony of the story. The emperor wanted a medicine that could keep his body alive forever. But the thing that outlived him was not his body. It was the mystery he created. Shu Fu never returned with the elixir. The ships, if they existed as described, are long gone. The wood rotted. The sails vanished. The names of the thousands who may have traveled with him were mostly lost. But the story remained. More than 2,000 years later, people still ask where Shu Fu went. They still visit places connected to his name. They still argue about whether the legend preserves a memory of real migration. They still imagine those ships moving across the gray sea, carrying young people, craftsmen, seeds, tools, and fear away from the empire of the first emperor. Maybe that was the only immortality anyone in this story ever truly found. Not a golden island, not a magic herb, not a secret medicine hidden beyond the waves, but a story powerful enough to outlive the man who demanded it. Qin Shi Huang tried to defeat death by sending a fleet into the unknown. Instead, he created a mystery that refused to die. The emperor who wanted to live forever is buried beneath a mountain. The man who fled from him may have become part of a civilization he never intended to shape. And somewhere between those two fates, the tyrant and the fugitive, the sea is still keeping its answer.